Anyway, so recently I've been really enjoying drawing with this thing. This is the Platinum 3776 Fine. So I've lost count how many times I have refilled this little cartridge here. It has a gold 14 karat nib. Really nice. I thought, oh, gold must be the best, you know. And then 2 months passed and I almost got used to this nib, despite it being gold, because it has like a shocking amount of feedback. It had so much feedback. In fact, I'd almost call it scratchy. So if it was on smooth paper, I'd be like, that's a lot of feedback, but it's still very controllable. But if it was on rough paper, it got to the scratchy level. If I had it on inverted, if I inverted the nib, right, then it really felt very scratchy, almost on any paper I put it on. And so I was like, what do I do with this pen? I mean, compared to like cheaper pens like the Pilot Kakuno, or even this cheap Jinhao pen, like these pens both cost like $20 Australian. This one costs $220 brand new Australian. And these pens are just smooth right out of the box. That was just amazing. So I was just thinking to myself, why is it so? Why are these pens smooth and they cost nothing? And this expensive, fancy, gold-nibbed pen is, I don't know, it feels really rough. So I took some terrible macro photos of the very end of the nib. And I discovered that the very end of the Platinum nib looks basically like the surface of the moon. It's like someone did a die cast of like sandpaper into the end of the nib. Like if I looked into the nib, like with a microscope, I might be able to see like trench warfare or something with little ink monsters waging wars and firing shells at one another. It just looked really, really awful. And then I looked at this cheap Jinhao here, and the end of this nib, right, was extremely polished. Looked like a mirror finish. And the Pilot Kakuno, also extremely polished. And I also have, just to make sure, I also photographed the end of the medium version of the Platinum 3776, and that also had a pretty rough texture to it. I don't think it was as rough as the fine version, and it definitely has a little bit of friction when you're writing, but it's quite, it's quite manageable, and it does give you a good amount of control. Is this camera even focusing on these pens? I have no idea. Did I leave the aperture too wide? Anyway, but this fine nib here was simply too rough. Too much friction, sort of scratchy, and I didn't like it, right? Sometimes, like when you were writing with it inverted to get like a really thin line, it would catch on the paper and really mess up a circle or something I was drawing, so it was just terrible. So, how to solve this problem? Because I fixed it. In fact, I removed the feedback that was in this nib entirely. And how did I solve this? Well, I used this stuff. Believe it or not, metal polish. It's cheapish, and for me it was free because I nicked it out of my dad's workshop. And I only wanted like a subtle improvement anyway to the end of the nib. I didn't want to like completely grind and then nib away into nothingness using some kind of polishing stone or I don't know. So this stuff contains very fine abrasives and also some kind of volatile hydrocarbon mix, which may be bad for plastic, but I'll talk about that later. So what I did, I rubbed a pea-size amount into the surface of some watercolor paper, because I needed paper that was extremely durable as I used it as a polishing surface. It's not going to like fall apart as I rub the nib along it, backwards and forwards. And then with light and mostly circular motions, I polished that nib on every tiny bit of surface that I might find myself drawing with. And then while doing this, I took little breaks from polishing and I tested it on a separate piece of paper to make sure it was smooth enough for my liking. Now the results were amazing actually. It was really smooth. The end of the nib now, it looks polished. I can now write with it inverted because I polished the inverted side as well, and it's really, really smooth. I think you can see the difference in the terrible macro photos I've taken. In fact, the fine nibbed one, which I have polished, is actually smoother, I reckon. It just doesn't have any ink in it. That's not a fair comparison. Anyway, it is actually smoother than the medium nibbed one now, which is pretty impressive. And I think I only polished it for like a good 10 minutes or something on the watercolor paper, maybe 15, just gently. Like I polished it like that, and then I rotated it, and I polished it again on this side, and I just kept on doing that for ages, on different angles as well. If I was going to do this again with another pen, I think I might actually remove the nib out of the pen while polishing the nib, because this metal polish, as I've mentioned before, it actually contains some kind of hydrocarbon mix. Yeah, hydrocarbons, 15%, and then soap and other stuff. So I didn't know if the hydrocarbons in here would actually damage the plastic or not. I was a bit worried. The feed of my nib and the plastic body actually seems to be completely unaffected, so that's good news. But your results may vary with different types of plastic, so just remove the nib and just play on the safe side, basically. Anyway, I think that's all I have to say about that little adventure I had. Little pen adventure. Yeah, auto sole, metal polish, and unconventional use. It's been awarded several times with gold, apparently, so that's pretty good. I don't think it actually says it's designed for polishing gold, though. Does it say polish for all metal parts, chrome, brass, copper, etc.? I guess it falls in the etc. category. Perhaps, I hope so. It worked very well anyway. It's just such a difference. Anyway, okay, that's enough from me. Goodbye.